Aloha y como mai to this HIAMFT Lunchtime Talk Story. My name is John Souza, and I'm the president of HIAMFT. My co-host Janet Covington and I are delighted to share this time with you and our very special surprise guest speaker. Before we begin, though, a few housekeeping items. We'll ask that you please enter any questions into the chat box, and Janet will do her best to bring those to the discussion as she can. We'll also be sending out CU certificates via email, so be on the lookout for those in the coming week or so. And if for some reason you don't receive that email, please reach out to us at HawaiianIslandsMFTs.org. And you can find that on our website. And finally, we'll end our discussion promptly at the top of the hour. So if you find you have additional questions for our speaker, you can email those questions directly to him, and we'll provide that contact information at the end of this time, or via email, or on the recording of this that will be available on the HIAMFT members website. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our special surprise guest speaker for this month, Rick Lewis. Rick is an author, a speaker, and a founder of the Professionals University of National Knowledge Education and Development. I don't want to take up all of our time with introductions, so I'm just going to have Rick take it from here. So Rick, if you would please.
Thank you, John. Everybody, in a minute, I'll give you a little more background about me, and then you'll understand why my identity, if you will, was initially withheld in your meeting invitation. But, you know, it's a cumulative appreciation I have for John at this point after the several of our preliminary conversations. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in today. Hopefully, this will give me a chance to repay the commitment you're showing to your organization and what appear to be the development of reasoned responses to the challenges we're all facing, as well as some helpful, I'd call it thought architecture that has the potential to shine a light on recent episodes of leadership coming from the unlikeliest of eventualities. So mostly today, I'd like to talk to you about what you all know, how what you all came to know as therapists can be translated into an understandable framework of healing, as opposed to other modalities, especially if you include the vast majority of what passes as preliminary reasoning in most academic circles. But all the same, that the majority of the population wouldn't even recognize. So truly, I mean, it's not possible to make any kind of healing progress in the pejorative sense if there's not clear communication going on between peers and colleagues of those who are tasked with the responsibility of circumnavigating it. Really, I mean, what I'm describing is that the dawning realizations that are of the most interest and delight to us when we're confused come slowly. It's a slow light rather than a sudden illumination that causes us to understand what might be really going on in any given situation, and to summon the courage to ask the kind of questions that speed up the process of getting to the point of any group task that arises in a professional setting, especially one that's dedicated to learning. So if we're on the lookout for the right clues, it's always possible to model vulnerability, admit what we don't know, what we don't understand, and ask the kind of questions that are going to be useful in a group setting, much like this. But I said I'd tell you a little bit about me. I am the founder of the Professionals University of National Knowledge, Education, and Development. Now, I don't expect you to remember that. It is a rather long title. Won't be any test on that. As an organization, we're actually more widely known by our acronym, PUNKED, PUNKED, stands for punked. And if you have a suspicion right now that you're being punked, you'd be correct. And the question I have for you is, how long did it take you to figure it out? Or are you just catching on in this moment that I've been intentionally speaking gibberish at you for the last 4 minutes? Just write in the chat right now what you were thinking as that last 4 minutes was going on. Just put in the chat what you were thinking as you were watching this unfold and imagining you were going to have to sit through an hour of this. What the heck is he saying? What's wrong with me? What the heck are you talking about? Let's get to the good stuff. Worried about my internet. This is going to be interesting. I'm having a better day. And for those of you who are off camera, if you would be willing to come on camera, that would be awesome. Don't do it if it's going to embarrass me or you, but if you're, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It really helps to see faces as a speaker. Thank you so much. Wondering who you are in your training, what this is going to be a bunch of nothing. Great. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts. And I'm glad nobody left. John and I were a little worried. I was like, I don't want to make this too long because we don't want to lose people. So now it's time for me to properly introduce myself. My name is Rick Lewis, and I am a good friend of John's. We actually met, John and I, when I was doing a keynote at it was the National Leadership Symposium, right? For HIAMFT, right?
Correct.
And so I was hired to do a keynote for them, and I'm an actor, an entertainer, and a speaker, author. And the last 10 years have been an experiment for me about how I can weave together professional development material and entertainment and theater to actually reach people in what I see as a form of healing. And therapy and entertainment to me have a lot in common, because for either of those things to be successful, we have to keep reaching people in new ways. Because if you just keep telling somebody the same thing, or you keep using the same approach, my experience with working with people for 40 years is that it takes a very short amount of time for someone's defense mechanisms to take whatever tool you're giving them and basically eliminate it from being useful if that place of habit or defensiveness doesn't want to be touched. And so it's why this is one of the domains in which John and I connected so well, which is a sense of play, being able to play, be curious, experiment, and explore is very integral to healing in my books. And I know John agrees because we've talked about that. But so what I wanted to do is share a little bit with you about what I've been up to as a speaker, author, entertainer, how I'm using play and theater from the perspective of professional development and supporting people in their development. And so what we'll start with is a short video that will show you how I introduce myself to corporate audiences when I'm on the job. It's a little different than what you saw here, but similar in that it's a surprise beginning. So John, let's go ahead and look at that.
My name is Rick Lewis. I'm a speaker and entertainer for corporate events. The stage is where the meeting attendees expect to see me. Little do the guests know that a unique learning experience is going to begin here at the dinner table. Once they sit down, they're going to be met by a very odd server who they will take for the real thing. While the guests register, I'm in the adjacent room explaining to the service staff how to play along with my inept waiter routine, where I dress identically to the serving staff and pose as a waiter who gets more and more odd and eccentric over the course of the meal. I instruct the servers how to play along with the gag and not give away that it's an act. The guests trickle in as I take a breath and get into character before I launch into this secret theater. I begin by pouring water from a height of about 2 feet, just trickling it into the glass until it's so full it's bulging over the surface. This subtle departure from the guests' expectations causes a gap in their experience as they wonder what's going on and search for an explanation. The whole point of the routine is to give the attendees an opportunity for self-observation. Rather than just being a talking head in front of the room, I'm providing a learning experience that they're already taking part in without even knowing it. This experience will be a useful reference point they can all refer to as we examine habitual human reactions to stress, to challenging circumstances, and how we can perform more optimally when our lives don't go exactly as we hope or expect. After providing every individual in the room an experience with the bad waiter, I hop up on stage as though I've been asked to apologize.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Yeah. So my banquet manager just said that she wanted me to say something because there were a couple people who weren't so happy with my service. So they said in training this morning that I should try and find my own unique style. So I was looking for one of those, and she said I don't think that's it. So she said to just take it as a learning opportunity and get the feedback from the customer, because that's kind of knows what Disney is all about. So how many people were happy with my service by show of hands? Okay, it's kind of hard to hear, but I appreciate you being honest. How many people wished I had a little bit more training before they put me on the floor? Okay, appreciate that too. Maybe I'll ask for some more of that. Yeah, so it's just I mean, it's not like, this is not like what Disney's wants to have happen. It was my first day today at this hotel, so, well, I had a bunch of first days at other hotels, but you just bear that in mind, and that's all. Just so I know, I guess you can have your keynote guy or woman come up. Oh, sorry, there was one more question. The other question banquet manager wanted me to ask is, how many of you are aware that you have been a part of the 60-minute social experiment? Obviously, now that you're talking a little bit, you're probably aware that all of you, every single person in this room, had a unique experience in relationship to the waiter. And some of you had a wonderful sense of humor. Others of you wanted to hurt me. Is there anyone who wants to hurt me, just so I know? Thank you, sir, back there. Anyone else? You, ma'am.
Cool, thank you, John.
Oh, man.
So that gives you a little bit of sense of the kind of fun and mischief that I like to get into with. So I was trying to figure out, this is actually my very first keynote in 6 months, because for obvious reasons. And I have been a speaker and entertainer for 20 years. The only thing that comes close to this period of lag time was in 2009, when we had the economy crash. The meeting industry stopped also for about 5 or 6 months. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these periods of time because they're very interesting. It's periods of tremendous heat and stress that everybody is under. But so this right here is my very first keynote in like 5 or 6 months. It's the first one I've done virtually. And I was trying to figure out how we could do something, some form of theater that would approximate a little bit of the kind of surprise that I'm able to do with a waiter routine. So that's how we came up with the fake speaker. So I appreciate you hanging in there for that. I was so nervous before doing it. I was afraid that John was, I was afraid a bunch of people were just going to leave and John was going to go, why'd you do that? But it's so funny after, I've been in this business for 45 years. And every time I try something new, it's the same level of being, my heart pounding, I'm all sweaty and nervous. And here we are, we're on Zoom. We've got 20 people. It doesn't matter. That moment of trying something new, of taking that risk, especially in relationship to human beings, obviously, that's where all the risk is, because we're in that moment, that place where we go, oh my gosh, I could get criticized for this, or I could be judged, or people might not like it. And that particular frame, that dynamic of human psychology is of immense fascination and import to me, because it's the moment at which real people either get to live their real lives or veer off of them into the lives that are offered and provided to them by Western culture, which is, as you know, a load of options and distractions and sensations and entertainment and fights that you can pick and causes that you can jump on board with. But there are so many ways and so many options to being on the mark with actually approaching what it is that you in your heart feel moved to do, but is going to be scary to take the step. Most people don't ever take those steps because there's so many options available. We've pretty much flattened and paved over the possibility of intelligent, positive risk-taking for people in our culture. As far as kids go, what we've done is we've removed nature, which is where most kids would get that from. Just time in nature, climbing up too tall in a tree or jumping a creek or whatever they do. In nature, that's where kids get that kind of exploration. And for adults, we've done it by removing face-to-face contact. And we're in the middle of this wild experiment right now, which is COVID and everybody on Zoom, everybody online, trying to figure out how do we do this? And how do we do it in a way that preserves some sense of human connection and human authenticity and aliveness while continuing to move forward and at the same time not overuse the technology. And I'm so curious about where this is going to go, where this is going to head in terms of how people will use this either to continue to distance themselves from the kind of risks that are useful, or if we can use it as a tool that's actually going to advance our professional development in whatever profession we're in. So the title of this talk was, I think somewhere I put in there, why act confident is terrible advice. Why act confident is terrible advice to give yourself or anybody else. And so the title of that talk has to do with what I was just talking about, which is because culturally the context of our culture is winning and conquest. So when you give people the advice to act confident, even though I think we all know where that comes from, what the spirit of that is intended to be, to act confident, but it has become this way of taking an underlying cultural pathology of having to dominate, win, be in control, not lose composure, and have people approach situations in a way that can be full of a lot of bravado and machismo and blustering and bullshit. Even, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, men and women can do all those things equally well. So what I see is, especially in the corporate environment where I've done over 500 presentations, over 500 organizations, and I've seen so much of what happens in the organizational realm, confident is being counterproductive. And what I like to talk about is how taking confidence and replacing that with the word curiosity and play helps to soften this idea about how we can approach a situation in a way that we can actually gain confidence. The phrase act confident makes it sound to somebody as though, well, confidence is just in you. It's inherently inside of you. And if you just line up with it the right way, then you're going to get in touch with it and you're going to be victorious. And in actuality, people don't have confidence. They have to go get confidence. And the only way you can get confidence is when you are willing to vulnerably, nervously, hesitantly approach situations where you feel unsure of yourself, where you feel, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's happening here. That's the only way we gain true confidence. And so that side of things, and I'm sure as therapists, this lines up with so much of what you work to do with your own clients, which is to let people get into a more authentic and vulnerable frame and really admit what's happening there and then move forward anyway in their lives. But I see so many people who just don't take those steps of moving forward, as I said, because there's so many options. And one of the options is to mouse out and draw away. But one of the second options that I see occurring a lot in the organizational frame is this act confident idea. It has people coming on really strong when they even, we're in a world full of experts now. Anybody can be an expert. You can be an instant expert today. You just get your website and you put up there, what it is you want to be known for, and you blow smoke. And, we see a lot of that. So in the course of doing this waiter routine, the whole design here is to get people in a frame where they're a little off balance and they get to see something about themselves and how they handle an unusual or challenging circumstance. So that when I start talking, instead of just being a talking head in front of the room, they've had an actual experience of themselves, of what they actually do when they're not feeling confident. And I can tell you, I have seen everything you can imagine in response to this waiter routine. People, and it's the same thing. I'm doing the same thing to everybody, but you have some people who go right into attack mode. They want to see the manager. They want me removed from the floor. They want to have me fired. There's always a handful of those people in the room. There's another handful of people who are just like the blinders go up and they're pretending like I'm at the table. I'm pouring water from a height of 3 feet and it's just trickling lightly into the glass and it's splattering around the table. And they're pretending like nothing's happening. Like, I don't see that. It's denial. And then the third group, these are 3 rough buckets. The third group are those who want to take me home and give me a safe place to stay where I won't hurt myself. Those are the rescuers, the people who are just like, oh my God, oh, the poor guy, like, You know, they want to smooth everything over and make it all right for me. So it's a very, very fascinating study to see what human beings do. And as a matter of fact, in exactly 10 years ago, John and I were just talking about this before we came on camera. 10 years ago today, I had just completed writing a book called Break a Rule, Seven Rules You Were Born to Break. It's the title of the book. I just finished writing it because in 09, at the end of 09, when the economy crashed, 2010, there was absolutely no meeting work for presenters like me. And I sat there watching my bank account just go one way out the door. My wife was pregnant with our third child. I had no work, no income coming in. And I had been a comedian for 15 years prior to that for corporate events. And I had watched over the years and follow me or precede me when I was shows. And I kept thinking as people were speaking, because I do a lot of, at that time, I was doing a lot of personal development, personal work on my own, just because I love growth. And I had been thinking to myself, oh gosh, you know, I think I could speak to people. But I was a comedian. Not only was I a comedian, I was a silent comedian. I was a mime. I did not talk at all because I was scared to talk in front of a group. So I did all this physical comedy. So when 09 hit, I had this idea to try and write something, maybe write a book about some ideas about what I had learned about people from doing that waiter routine and seeing all these different kinds of reactions for people. So I put my butt in a chair. This was at early 2010. And I forced myself to write for 12 hours a day. I sat in that chair and I would sit there and I would squirm and I'd want something to eat and I would get bored and then I'd have writer's block. But I just forced myself to like get these ideas out of my head and write them down. And so it took me about 5 months to write this book, 7 Rules You Were Born to Break, which is an overview of what I've seen about the default rules that we all follow in Western culture, but we never talk about them. Everyone walks around playing by this script, but we don't discuss it. We don't say, okay, you know, today we come to the office and we're all going to, for instance, be normal. One of the rules is be normal. Everyone agrees, we're just going to be normal here. So I wrote the book. The quick ending to the story is when fall came and meetings started to happen again, I called back all my clients and I started marketing myself as a speaker without ever having spoken before as a presenter. And people wanted this idea. They resonated with the idea. I started getting hired for speaking, and it was like getting thrown into the deep end, just having to learn how to present ideas in a coherent and interesting way for people. So the whole waiter routine for me morphed into this opportunity to share what I started to see about these ruts, these routines we fall in culturally. And that led to some amazing, fascinating interactions with a lot of professionals out there. One of which was a gentleman. So I got hired, this would have been maybe in 2012. I got hired to speak to 500 mental health professionals for the Canadian Psychiatry Association. 400 psychiatrists in a ballroom, and I'm going around doing this waiter routine, sticking my arm in people's face, picking up silverware by reaching across the entire table, taking meals away before people had finished and asking if they're done, crawling under the tables on the floor to pick up crumbs. So I could see it. I could see as I'm proceeding with this, these 400 psychiatrists, that slowly every single one of them is forming a clinical diagnosis for my condition. They're like, you know, they're getting into the nuance of the DMV5 or whatever, the DS, what do you call it? The DSMV or whatever it is, the official, you know, guide of label you with your problem. And they were all like trying to figure me out, and they're looking at me, and some of them were getting pretty concerned. So at the very end of this routine, with the waiter routine, one of my last bits is I'm walking in front of the ballroom, and I pre-arrange a tray jack stand that's got these metal plate warmer covers on it. You've probably all seen them in a ballroom where they got these metal covers that keep the meals warm. So I take a handful of those, I put them on the stand, and then I do this Chevy Chase fall over the top of them where I just go crashing through them, and it makes this huge wave. And then what always happens, so they look like, what's going on? So I did this for the psychiatrist. I'm laying there on the floor, starting to do this next physical comedy bit where I'm like slowly getting myself up off the floor. But before I can even get up, one psychiatrist leaps out of his chair. He runs over to where I am, a big guy, and he picks me up off the ground. He just lifts me up. I'm a pretty big guy, about 6 feet tall. This guy was very, very powerful dude. He picks me up and he turns me around to face him, and he looks me right in the eyes very intently, and he says, "Are you okay?" And I was like, whoa, this is, okay, I don't know where this is going. I said, I just looked at him. I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he said, "Well, are you sure? That was a pretty bad fall. Maybe you want to come over and sit down for a minute." I looked at him again because I could tell he was starting to move in this professional role of like some kind of intervention. And I wanted him to get that, wait a sec, you don't know what's going on here. So I looked at him and I just said, I tried to be really lucid, you know, make eye contact. I said, "Really, I'm okay." Now at that point, everyone in the ballroom had gone completely silent. They were all staring at us, but I was whispering because I didn't want to give away what the act was. And he's looking at me, and I've said for the second time, "Really, I'm okay." He's staring back at me, and what he says at that point is, while tightening his grip on my arm, "I understand, come with me." So no matter what I said, this individual, who is a trained doctor, who knows what he sees when he sees it, he's making a call on it. What he was doing in that moment is he was confidently intervening on behalf of the framework of the context of his profession, which is normalcy. What's normal, what's not. If it's not normal, let's bring it back into line with medication or whatever means we have to. So he had made this assessment, and his whole manner of trying to bring this back online was single focused. He had some blinders on, enough so that when I said, "Oh, I left out a part of the story." So this is what happened. Rewind. So when he said, "You may feel okay, but I think you and I should go for a walk," because I knew what was happening, I said, "I'm an act." I told him, I said, "I'm an act. I've been hired by your association management to do a comedy routine. I'm about to get on stage and start a juggling show." That's what I said to him. And he was locked in on me like this. And that's when he said, you know, I thought that was going to clear everything up, right? That's when he looked at me and he said, "I understand, come with me." Those were literally the words he used. And I went, whoa, we are out there. We've got this person who's supposed to bring other individuals back to reality couldn't make the leap himself in that moment. So I'm standing there wondering what to do. And the woman who hired me was watching. She came out of her seat in the conference room. She came over and she walked up to us and she put her hand on the guy's shoulder. She said, "Fred, I've hired this man. He's our speaker." And the look on this poor guy's face at that point would have been appropriate to somebody having been told at age 60 that they're actually not the natural born son of their parents. Was like that level of betrayal of like, what? And he just couldn't compute it. And he kind of looked back and forth. He put his eyes on his shoes. He walked out of the ballroom and he did not come back for the rest of that event. Now, this is a super exaggerated example of what people get into when they're doing this thing called act confident. I know I've got it all under control. I know what's happening here. I'm in charge. Make it go the way that I see it has to go. So this is on one side of the spectrum over here of acting confident. On the other side of the spectrum, so the second story is I do this whole waiter routine. And then I come out and I reveal myself as a comedian and I do a whole comedy show, juggling, acrobatics, riding a unicycle. And at the end of my comedy show, I'm riding a unicycle that's 12 feet high. And I get a bunch of people out of the audience to help me get on it. So I get everyone to help me get on the unicycle. And then I'm finally up on top of the unicycle. And there's a man sitting there who I had had the following interactions with. These were service professionals in the food service industry. So all these people worked in food service, events, dining, food, entertainment. Here I am doing this waiter bit for 400 food service professionals. And I couldn't make the slightest misstep at a table without every head at that table going like this, like, what are you doing? You don't ever do that. The fork doesn't go on that side, or you never reach across somebody like that. And so I had all this reaction from the guests right off the bat. And as I continued, I was going table to table, and I get to every table when I'm doing this bit. Every table gets an experience of me doing something odd with them, or several things as the waiter. And every time I got to this one table, there was a man sitting there with a blue shirt and this bright yellow tie on. And everybody else is giving me dirty looks. They're impatient, they're gruff, they're irritated with me. And this man is just looking at me with this kind of like open expression. And the first time I go and drop a bunch of silverware on the floor, he reaches over and he puts his hand on my back and he says, "Hey, relax, it's okay. Everybody has a rough day, like chill." Because when I'm doing this character, I'm playing it, super nervous and super like I'm really worried and scared. And he reaches over and he's just like, "Hey, calm down, it's all right, it's no big deal." So I go back the next time and I overfill the water glasses. And again, everyone's really upset. And he looks over, he puts his hand on the hand that's filling the pitchers. And I've got this name tag on because I always wear a fake name tag as a waiter. So I've got this name tag on that says Malcolm on it. He looks at my name tag and he says, "Hey, Malcolm, it's okay. Thanks for taking such good care of us. I really appreciate it." Every time I went back to his table, all he did was empower me. And now you got to understand, my job is to get under the skin of everybody. Like my job is to like get everyone a little bit riled up and going, in the wrong direction. I could not, no matter what I did, and I tried, I kept going back to his table with more egregious forms of poor service, more broad, more noisy. And no matter what I did, the only thing he was committed to is making sure that I was okay with the person I was and the job I was doing. And I have to tell you, the impact it had on me was so moving. I would walk away from his table. I just wanted to walk back and sit in his lap and tell him about the real me, so he could just do the same thing to who I really am. I mean, the guy was just, it was extraordinary. So I went through this whole process with him. And when I found myself up on top of that 12-foot unicycle, I'm looking down, and way in the back of the room, I see him sitting there with this kind of confused, sober look on his face. And I just thought, darn, I wonder what he's thinking right now. I wish I could communicate to him something about the value he brought me. So I'm sitting on top of this 12-foot unicycle, 400 people looking at me, and I just say, spontaneously, I point to the back of the room and I say, that man in the yellow shirt is the kindest man I have ever met. And other people were kind of like, why is he saying that? It's, you know, kind of went over most people's heads. But he received something. The event ends. Everybody leaves the ballroom. Slowly, you know how it is after an event, people talking, trickling out. Eventually the ballroom's completely empty and I'm there by myself, putting away all my props, my unicycle and my juggling equipment. And I look up, and at the far corner door of this big, big ballroom, I see the man with a yellow tie walking back in. And I'm thinking to myself, oh no. I was like worried that this had been really offensive to him and he felt set up and all the things I could imagine he was going to say to me. And he came in, he had a very sober expression on his face. He walked all the way across that ballroom floor and he got up right in front of me and he pulled up a chair and he sat down in front of me. I didn't know what he wanted to say, but I tell you, this individual had earned every bit of my attention. So I pulled out a chair myself, I sat down facing him, and he proceeded to tell me about his home life. He had 2 kids, a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. The 14-year-old daughter had just been recently diagnosed with a brain tumor. And she had to take special medication. There was all sorts of help she needed. She was completely bewildered by, why is this happening to me? She was super depressed. She didn't even want to go on. She had medication she had to take. She didn't want to take the medication. So this gentleman, who was the executive chef of a big hotel in Texas, quit his job to stay home and care for his daughter. At the same time, he's got a 12-year-old son who he's also trying to keep some degree of normalcy going for and take care of as well. He's describing all this to me, and I'm not sure why, but then he says, the last 2 years of my life have been the hardest 2 years I have ever been through. I have never had more doubts about myself as a father and a person. He said, I didn't know what you were doing was an act. I thought you were really a waiter. But because of what you did, I got to see that who I am is a good person. And he was sitting there in front of me, and the tears just started to roll down his cheeks and down his tie and his shirt. And I'm sitting there weeping myself at this point, watching a man who could have been angry, he could have been confident, he could have been a lot of things other than so vulnerable and so open to seeing another person for who they really are, that he, in the process of empowering me, he reflected back to himself his own worth and his own merit as a human being. I was blown away. And I tell this story a lot because that example of someone who meets an unexpected situation, something that's unknown, something that I don't know what's going on. And not only did he meet it that way the first time, when I was just a bad waiter, when I completely turned the whole thing upside down and went, no, that's not it. Now, you know, let me give you this. He did this thing again. He came back again with this vulnerability, and it just blew me away. And to me, that was an example and an act of healing. I was watching him heal himself from what he had been through. He was coaching himself into a form of extreme health. And I believe that that is entirely possible for human beings. It is totally possible for a human being to learn how to coach themselves to that kind of openness, authenticity, vulnerability, and healing. And the way to do it is by being willing, and this is, for me, this has been what my whole life's been about. Because it's only been the last couple of years I've discovered that I have a huge number of symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder. I've always been a super anxious person. A lot of things frighten me, scare me, worry me. That's constantly going on. And as a result of that, the first thing I did as a kid is I developed this act confident persona. I made people laugh. I became a performer, but I spent many years pretending to be confident on stage and then running back to my room because I could not have a face-to-face conversation with people. And that's still difficult for me. So in the face of this anxiety and beginning to see, it took me a long time to start to go, hey, you've really got some areas here where you're really not confident at all. And the more I began to study it, the more I began to see the work that I needed to do to enter this realm of really helping and supporting others. And what I began to do is share what I call games for confidence. And what games for confidence are is a series of a lot of little exercises, little games, again, a playful approach to what can I insert into my day that's going to make me step just an inch over that line to that place I don't want to go because it's uncomfortable for me. And the games, which I made up for myself and then started to play, and then as they worked, began to share them with other people, the games are designed to facilitate this moment which everybody has and can have more of, where our mind convinces us that it's absolutely not okay for you to fill in the blank. Ask that person out on a date, ask for a raise, take the spider out of the house, whatever it is. We all have those areas where I can't do that, I can't go there. And of course, what happens over time for people is the more you obey those little voices, the smaller your life gets. Until after a long period of time, these rules, these interior rules close in on us and we're obeying them unconsciously, and then we're wondering why we're not having fun, why our relationships aren't working, why we don't make as much money as we should, why our health is poor. And I see this across the board. When people don't see the unconscious rules at work and they obey them, and they structure their lives around tiptoeing around them and not working with them, they suffer in all sorts of ways. So for me, in my position, I'm not a therapist, obviously, so I'm doing a different kind of work, but my passion, my work, is to offer up this way of gaming yourself back into the kind of world that you inhabited as a kid. You're willing to try stuff. You're willing to experiment, to risk. You don't care so much about what other people think. So the games, now this is a momentous moment I'm going to share with you, because I started this project. I've been writing the games and sharing them with audience members for 4 years. And I've been working on a project where I can actually put the games into courses. So people who need to work on a discrete area of building confidence, like promoting their skills and abilities, managing conflict, staying more present with chaos, I've put them all into courses. It took me 4 years to learn about internet marketing, to write all the material, write all the courses. I can't describe the kind of journey this has been. And I've had to step over so many times when I went, I can't do this. This isn't going to work. I don't know what I'm doing. But today, this site went live for the first time. I've been, because of COVID, and I'm completely out of work as a speaker. The same thing that happened 10 years ago when the economy crashed in '09 has just occurred again. And I went through the same process of, I'm like, okay, I can say, this is disastrous, poor me, or I can roll up my sleeves and figure out who I am now in this new world. And so I fast-tracked this project, which I've been kicking along in small steps, and gamesforconfidence.com is now live. It's a resource you could use to send people to if you want a partnership with someone who could help people who just need a fun, interesting way to be engaged in their healing process. I just been gabbing away here. I see now we're just about out of time.
And that's, Rick, a great segue into folks. Anybody who's seeing clients, I like to refer my clients to Rick's website and his Games for Confidence for all kinds of issues that people present with clinically.
John is going to put up a link to the site or send you a link, and also an email, my email address. So I'm sorry I didn't leave time for questions. I got carried away. If you have anything you'd like to ask about, anything you'd like to dialogue about, or just stay in touch, I'd love to hear from any of you. So you'll have my email address. Feel free to reach out. And thanks for letting me run my piece of weird theater on you and not leaving. And all the best with what you're facing and with the service you're providing and the work that you do. I'm deeply appreciative and grateful of the function you all serve.
Rick, thank you so much. Your storytelling was fantastic. I was able to attend your waiter routine, but man, your storytelling really got to me too. I've put the website link in the chat, and we'll follow up with folks. Rick, what is your email again?
Use Rick at gamesforconfidence.com.
Okay, great. I'll put that in the chat here too. And folks, if you have additional questions or thoughts for Rick, please email him. Go to his website, try out the 30-day free trial on the Games for Confidence. You won't be disappointed. Send your clients to him. It's good stuff. Rick, mahalo nui. It's been a pleasure.
For me too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll look forward to seeing you all, hopefully, in a couple of weeks on August 26th for another one of these. So,
nice.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.